Alright folks, welcome to Chapter 6, Character Development. This should be another relatively short video. I think there's only like 22 slides. So the objectives, the more objectives, and we're through 3 of the 24 slides already. Woohoo! So, games in many genres structure gameplay around characters. If you look at the Witcher series, especially Witcher 3, Geralt is the main character, and everything kind of focuses the story around him. So your character should be distinctive and credible. Now, sometimes that goes a little bit excessive. Like if you look at Halo, the Master Chief, I don't know how credible that is to have somebody, even with, however they say they, enhanced him and stuff, some of the stuff that he does, and how much better he is than a regular human. But you get the idea. So the ultimate goal is to design characters that people find appealing, people believe in, and people can identify with. So if you think back to some of the things you watch on TV or some of the games you play, if you're a big Naruto fan, a lot of people can identify with him because he had a rough start, but he has a lot of heart, and he keeps going. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to be Geralt and and hang out with Yen or Yennefer and Triss and that kind of stuff. So you get the idea. So you want to have a believable character that appeals to people. All right. So the relationship between the player and the avatar. Did the player design the avatar? In Witcher 3, you don't really design your main character. He's your main character. In Halo, you don't design your main character. But in the new one, Destiny, you do design your main character. Is the avatar visible on the screen? In Halo, you can play in first person and never even see the Master Chief. But in Witcher 3, you play in third person, so you're always seeing your avatar. And then how is it controlled? Do you have full control over him? Can you swing the weapon whenever you want? Can you move him whenever you want? Or is he just a picture on the screen and you just, select choices and things like that? Avatars that we control, we tend to identify with more than avatars that we don't have a lot of control over. So that might be a selling point. Alright, so player-designed avatars are the ones that players identify with, I don't want to say the most, because there are, obviously the superhero kind of things. We all want to be, Geralt. We all want to be the Master Chief and just go in there and just kick some alien booty. But our custom avatars are harder to leave, like especially in MMOs. We make a specific character, and we start to identify with that character and kind of feel that that's us if we were in that game world. And we have a harder time to leave. So we can create the personal attributes. I can make him tall. I can make him short. I can make him fat, skinny. I can give him a specific nose, things like that. And then I can kind of role play his personality. In Star Wars: The Old Republic, I can be evil and I can just run around and kill pretty much everybody. That kind of stuff. So things that we create ourselves, and as we create these, then we kind of earn different things and we build a reputation as a character. This is one of the things that kind of really has helped World of Warcraft to kind of hold on. You could make your unique character. You could build him up with a bunch of raid assets and things like that so that he was pretty much God compared to the other mobs in the game. And then you were like, oh, wow, I'm this cool super character, and I made him, and I did all this, and you've got a lot of time and money invested and emotions invested in that character, and so that you'll never want to drop your subscription. All right. Then they talk about specific and non-specific avatars. So a non-specific avatar is when your avatar is kind of assumed to be the player. In early games, especially text-based games, you didn't have a player. The designer didn't really do a lot of stuff for you because you weren't really on the screen. And nowadays we have specific avatars. We have detailed characters with detailed histories and personalities. When we go to Star Wars: The Old Republic and we compare, Satele Shan to Malik, very different. So games with strong graphics and strong storylines tend to be more appealing than not. Alright, then as far as control goes, we have indirect control and then direct control. Indirect control, I click where the avatar should go and the avatar kind of goes there. So I'm kind of guiding the player, but I'm not really controlling him. Diablo 3 would be an example of this. In Diablo, I just click on the ground, go here, go here, go here, go here, and my guy starts kind of moving. Where in Star Wars: The Old Republic, I click the W key, my guy moves forward. I click the A key and he moves to the left. I hit the Z key and he pulls out his weapon. So I have complete control on him. I am the avatar. And whatever he does, I have control of it, so I have to take responsibility because I must have done that, because he won't do anything on his own. Now, I don't know if I believe this slide. It says that male players do not identify strongly with their avatars. And I guess there is some truth to that. Again, a lot of male players have learned from the old days to play female characters because the hitboxes were smaller. Some males play female characters because they're perverts. And some males play female characters because they're homophobic. They don't want to be staring at a man the whole time that they're playing a game. So some people lack imagination, and especially on the male side, and we can't kind of put ourselves in the game if we're a guy. Or we just can't put ourselves in the game. So we want to play a character that's pleasing for us to look at. Where women tend to identify with their avatars. Women make some of the best looking female avatars in games because they know what females should look like. Man, we just go right to the breast slider and start playing with that. Oh, now I got a hot chick. Where girls spend more time with the actual cosmetics, the details of the face and things like that. So if you want to identify your game more with women or draw a larger female audience, you want to make sure that you have extensive character customization, especially the little details of the face. Move my cheekbones. Where do I put my makeup on? How does the makeup apply? Can I make my eyelashes bigger? Things like that. All those little things go a long way. So when you're designing your character, you need to think about how is the player going to relate to this avatar? Is he like the Call of Duty dude where he's just a soldier? So when you think about how many, college-age females play Call of Duty, it's pretty small if you look at the entire demographic of that. Because they can't really relate to being a soldier out killing people. So how do you want people to relate to your avatar? And then what geographical segment are you going for? Are you going for college-age males? Are you going for college-age females? Are you going for younger kids? Are you going for older people? Things like that. And then you have to select the control method. Am I going to be able to control him a great deal, or am I going to control him, just click where he kind of guide him? And then how much characterization is there going to be in the appearance and personality? If I have to play the game the exact same way everybody else plays the game, and my run-through is exactly the same as my friend's run-through, then personality didn't really come into play. Where with Star Wars, personality does come into play because you get different choices, and I can do different things, and I can, as a bounty hunter, I can kill my targets, or I could freeze them and bring them back alive. And then the story changes a little bit based on that. So personality kind of plays a part. All right, and then visual appearance. An art-driven character design is the best method for simple characters that don't change a whole lot during the game. And then story-driven design is best for complex characters that change a lot during the game. Examples of this again are Star Wars: The Old Republic. When you first start Star Wars as a trooper, you're a sergeant and you're a low-level kind of grunt guy, and then eventually you make your way up to, I think eventually you become a general somewhere. And then you have real cool armor, and then people kind of bow to you. If you've ever played Archetypes, after a certain level, when you walk through the city, the guards all like, oh, hey, thanks for saving us, and great job, and they all bow down to you. So it's very different based on the level of the character. So there's a definite story behind it. All right, and then physical traits. Characters fall into three general categories: humanoids, non-humanoids, and hybrids. I like to consider an elf as a hybrid because obviously they look human except for the ears and the little slenderness, and then you have the non-humans that are like animals and monsters and that kind of stuff, and then you have your art-driven characters that kind of fall into, they're either cool or they're tough or they're cute or they're goofy, and if you look at most games, you could really kind of classify game-generated characters into those four categories. Now, next slide talks about hypersexualization, which means you're exaggerating sexual attributes of characters. And they tell you to avoid this. It says they're cliches, they only appeal to puber audience, they may turn off part of your audience. And that is absolutely true. if your game sucks or your gameplay is just the same as everybody else's and there's nothing to distinguish you between your game and anybody else's game, and most of the other games are probably better in different areas than yours are, then you kind of got to throw in the sexual appeal. So two examples of this are League of Angels. In League of Angels, you can see you kind of play. It's I want to say it's an Eastern game, either from Korea or China or something like that. But your avatars are pretty generic, and then as you're playing throughout the game, you talk to different angels, and then you do different missions for these angels and things like that. And obviously, the angels are over-sexualized. When you have to advertise your game like this, it kind of tells most regular people that your game probably sucks because I got to put big things in there to attract people to play. And this actually isn't even the worst one. In a game called Scarlet Blade, you can only play as a female character, and your female character is almost always half-dressed. Actually, well, I don't even say half-dressed, barely dressed, and there are things that you can buy in the game to make your character completely naked. And so it's an MMO, and from the reviews and things that I've seen, it says it's not a terrible MMO, but just the advertising and that all your characters are female and everything that pops up on the screen is a giant boob, that's way over-sexualizing a game. So, don't do it. Alright, so clothing, weapons, symbolic objects, accessories reveal personal style. Some games allow you to put on earrings or piercings and necklaces, decals, like if you play PlanetSide 2, you can have cool emblems on your shoulder or your chest. Your choice of weapons can also be revealing. Do I have a gun? Do I have a bow? Do I have a sword? Do I have a mace? Stuff like that. And then some games, like when you earn a certain weapon, people realize that weapon has a certain power or that you've attained a certain level. If you play, I'll just stop there because you got that kind of self-explanatory. They also mention sometimes that names can reveal a character's personality or ethnic background, but you have to be careful with that so it doesn't feel too cartoony. If I got a character named Old Man Jenkins, hey, now he's going to be some old dude that's probably cranky. But sometimes it's kind of funny because, like in Borderlands, there was a dude named Nine Toes that you had to, you got a mission to go kill him, and he was a bad guy. And then as you fought him, you realize, or like when you first met him, he had a gun with a big knife blade on the front of it. And then you learned that at one time he dropped it, and it hit his toe and chopped it off, and that's why he was called Nine Toes. So sometimes it's kind of cool, other times not so much. Alright, then they talk about colors and sidekicks. Your game should have a lot of colors. You want to allow customization. Men tend to go to darker colors, where females tend to go for more vibrant colors. And again, when we say tend, I'm not saying that all female characters have bright colors. I'm just saying that the majority of them tend to focus on, brighter colors. So you want to make sure that your color palette allows people to do different things. If I want to be a dark emo dude in a vampire game, you gotta have some dark colors in the game. There's not a whole lot of need for bright unicorn rainbow colors in a vampire game. Alright, and then you can offer sidekicks. And this is another thing where Star Wars: The Old Republic offered this very well. By the time you hit level 10, you got your first sidekick or companion, and that companion would back you up. And then as you went through the first 50 levels, you earned I want to say 3 or 4 more. And each companion allowed you to do different things. Some companions you could have romance options, and you could build a relationship with them, and then there would be little kissy scenes, stuff like that. But the companions also provided different support. One character would be a ranged character who would stay off to the side and damage your targets for you. One character would be a healer, and he would sit there and heal you while you damage the targets. So depending on your play style, you could pick a favorite companion to use and kind of go through the progress of the game. Alright, creating character depth. When I look at a character like Geralt, you can just look at him and know that there's a lot of depth in there. You can see obviously from his scars that he's been battle hardened, so he's been in a lot of fights. You can see his kind of mean look, that he doesn't have a lot of respect for nonsense and things like that. But just looking at him, you know there's a lot of depth in that character. And if you actually play through the Witcher series, you find out there's so much story about his background. Whereas a game like Star Trek Online lets you design your character how you want, wear whatever clothes you want, and you can actually go into your character and create a biography. Hey, here's my character's background and stuff like that. So you can kind of create your own story. So you should kind of design your character like in writing. Hey, here's what he's gonna do, and he's battle hardened, and he's this, and he's that, or he's nice, and he's very curious and things like that. And then let the artist kind of develop the visual appearance and see where that comes from, or see how it turns out. All right, role, attitude, and values. Every character plays a role. In Star Trek Online, you're the commander of a ship. In Witcher 3, you run around, you kill monsters. So you should have that information all kind of like printed out or available. They say create a backgrounder. So your major character should have a whole bunch of information in writing that players can actually dig into. And a lot of times this is released before the game is released to kind of keep people interested in the game. Part of the marketing thing. As they're working on the game and different parts are developed or close to development, they'll leak different things out. Hey, here's the main character, and here's going to be his background story. And here's another character, and here's their story. And then here's where this big battle of Wolf 359 happens. That kind of stuff. All right, and then you have the character's attributes. How much health they have. Where was their location? Do they own any property? In a lot of games, they allow you to have houses, and you can decorate the houses and things like that. Is my character rich? Is he poor? That kind of stuff. All right, and then the dimensionality. Well, I'll say that 3 times fast. So your character should have more than one dimension. And I think Star Wars: The Old Republic pulls this one off the best because there are different choices, and sometimes the choices aren't cut and dry. I mentioned before, you go in, there's an old couple and they're starving and they need money for food, and they want you to steal some power converters, and then when you go to steal the power converters, the guy that's supposed to be protecting the power converters tells you, hey, if you steal these, they're going to kill my family because I didn't protect them. So then you got to kind of make that choice. Do I steal them and let this guy's family die, or do I not steal them and let the old people die? So a lot of different choices and factors go into the character's development. And then after you make that choice, your character has changed, and you've changed them. You've done that, so you're going to have ownership of the character. Other parts in the game allow you to be, like romantic with a character. And then other parts, you hate this one character. And then in other parts, there's characters you feel sorry for. So there's a lot of different emotional states that can come out of video games just from one specific character. The original Mario Brothers only had one state. You had to save the princess, and you were attacking all the bad guys. You were trying to get past all the bad guys, and that was it was very one-dimensional. Where games nowadays, like Star Wars: The Old Republic and that kind of stuff, are multi-dimensional. All right, you should allow for growth in the character. The character should be able to grow, not only in levels and things like that, but personality changes, or even how the player reflects on life. I may go into a game hating the enemy, but then as I've gone through the game, I've realized, or some story has kind of happened and things, where now I realize that the enemy is just like me. He's just some dude following orders, and there's actually just one bad guy that runs that enemy, who's their leader, that is bad. And the enemy itself isn't bad. He has to do it, or else his family's going to be killed. So stuff like that. Now, typically in video games, if you've ever played a Fable, you actually kind of start out young and you kind of grow taller and you kind of grow older as you play. So sometimes they use things like that to kind of show you growth or progression in the games. All right, then your character archetypes, or archetypes, however you want to say it. What's the hero's journey pattern? Is it, is he like Master Chief and he was experimented on and he's an experiment and that's why he's got all these cool superpowers? Is he a Jedi and he was born with superpowers? So, the background. And there's stories found in all cultures, and they give you some reading. Joseph Campbell or Carl Jung. Jung, for more ideas. And they just tell you, obviously, try not to be... I don't even know how to say the word. So just try not to use things that are overly done already out there. Try to come up with something new, something unique. All right, and then audio design. Audio sounds reveal the character. If there are cool audio sound effects, and anytime your character is on the screen, the music's cool. You tend to think of your character as cool. But if you're playing The Witcher 3 and all of a sudden some like Rainbow Bright music comes on, you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't match at all. So audio design goes into it a lot. Especially games like GTA 5 and the whole series. When you're hammering somebody or you're hitting somebody in the road or something like that, and they scream out obscenities, that kind of fits, and sometimes it's funny the way they do it. So it kind of makes the gameplay fun. You want to go do it again because you want to see something else or hear something else funny. So most game design companies have an audio department where they work on sound effects and specific music and things like that. And a lot of orchestra conductors and things like that actually get jobs doing music for video games because it's such a huge part of the game. All right, and then wrapping it up, you kind of get the idea. So just remember, if you have any questions as you're reading this stuff or you're listening to me, make sure you email me towards the beginning of the week so I can get back to you so you have enough time to work on your assignments. And speaking of your assignments, let's talk about your assignments for this week. All right, so this week, for some reason, they have your stuff all wrapped up in an assignment folder. All right, you've got your character assignment. So you're going to write some information about the main character of your game. Tell me about his character. What motivates him? What drives him? What is his past? What's he trying to do in the game? Things like that. And then you're going to drop that in the box. And then character design. You're going to create your own character using Photoshop or Illustrator or some other tool. Or you can create Sackboy. And then you're going to drop that in the box. And then your favorite video game character. So now you're going to go to the forum and you're going to post stuff about your favorite video game character. So a picture, why this is your favorite character, and then you're going to share thoughts with at least one other poster on their character. And the thought can be, oh, I like him too. That's too easy. Come on, give me something cool. Hey, did you see that character in this video game? And it was so cool when he did this. So give me at least that. All right, I think that wraps it up for this week. Remember, if you have any questions, make sure you email me right away. Other than that, hope things are going well for you, and I'll see you next week.